Hello and welcome. Thank you everyone for coming along to our second webinar in our Diet and Nutrition and Health series. The session's on what is healthy eating. I hope if you haven't attended the last session, you've had a chance to catch up with it on YouTube, and I hope that you find today's session useful. So I will hand over to Vasuda, who will take you through the programme. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on what is healthy eating. This is our second, as Elizabeth said, this is our second webinar in the webinar series, Diet, Nutrition and Health. Move my slides. Just some housekeeping rules. Please stay muted and turn off your camera during the webinar. And if you have got any questions, please use the chat function, and then we'll come back to you at the end of the sessions and to answer those questions. We would like to hear from you. Your feedback is really important for us. At the end of the webinar, we'll be sending out the feedback survey form. So we would really appreciate if you can fill that for us, please. Thank you. The last bit, the webinar will be recorded and it will be shared on our YouTube channel, Healthy Brahm, and it can be later seen by people who couldn't come today. So today's outline of session is we have got 3 sessions today. Mel Cotton, our Public Health Senior Program Officer, she's got a background in nutrition. She's going to talk about Eatwell Guide and food labeling. The second session is on food habits in Birmingham. Lydia Carter, our program officer, public health program officer, she also has got a background in nutrition. She's going to talk on this. And I'm one of the GP registrars. I'll be talking about plant-based diets, vegetarian and vegan. So I will hand over to Mel now to do her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vasuda. So I'm just going to share my screen and then I'll get going.
Yeah.
Okay, is that the right screen for everybody?
Yes, yeah, it's fine.
Lovely. Okay, brilliant. So thank you very much. So thank you for coming, everyone. My name is Mel Coton. I'm a Senior Public Health Programme Officer here at Birmingham City Council. And previously, I have worked in community nutrition for the NHS and local authority. So what I'm going to do today is going to take you through the government healthy eating guidelines. So we're going to have a look through what the different food groups are, what foods go into those groups and why we need them. We're also going to have a little look at some of the portion sizes, so examples of those portion sizes for each of the food groups. And then once we've covered the Eatwell guide, we're going to have a look a little bit at food labelling. So just the different types of food labels, what they mean and how they can help you in making decisions so that you have you can make healthier decisions while you're shopping for different foods. Before I get going, I just want to do a couple of acknowledgements that the Eatwell Guide content is Crown copyright. We are allowed to use it, we just have to acknowledge it. And also to make this local resource, I have used a lot of information from the UK government, the NHS and the British Dietetics Association. And you can find more information using the links below. But there will be more information that I share with you for further resources as we go through the presentation. So this is the Eatwell Guide, and like I mentioned before, this is the UK guidelines for healthy eating. And what the Eatwell Guide does is it divides the foods that we eat into 5 different groups based on what they give our bodies and how our bodies use the food. Some of you may be aware of the Eatwell Plate from a little while ago. So it's a very similar tool, but these days we're using the Eatwell Guide, and there's a few little changes from the Eatwell Plate. One of those changes is the purple section that you can see, that's a little slither on the bottom right, used to be a little bit bigger in the Eatwell Plate because it used to contain foods such as chocolate, sweets, crisps and cake. So what they've done with the Eatwell Guide is actually taken those foods out, and what stays in that purple section is oils and spreads. So that's one change from the original Eatwell Plate. There's a little reference in the bottom right corner to energy intake and recommended amounts of energy. So we shouldn't be having any more than 2,000 calories per day for a female and 2,500 for a male. There's a reference in the top right corner for how much fluid we need to take every day. And then the top left corner, there's a little nod to food labelling. So they've just added a few little things to this Eatwell Guide that were missing from the Eatwell Plate that was used before this iteration of the guidance. And the Eatwell Guide, it gives you a representation of an overall balance of a healthy diet. So it's not necessarily something to follow for every meal, but it gives you an idea of the proportions of the different food groups that you should be aiming for a balanced diet. So for example, you know, a lot of fruits and vegetables and your carbohydrate foods, but we'll go through those in more detail now. It is important to note though that the Eatwell Guide applies to most people but not everybody. So anybody with a special dietary requirement or any medical conditions that may be affected by their diet, most of those people will know what if they need to make any changes to their diet. But if they're not sure, then they should get advice from a dietitian or their GP on how they can adapt these guidelines for their, you know, healthy eating. Children under 2 years, they also have different nutritional needs to older children and adults. And so at that stage in their life, the Eatwell Guide doesn't apply. There are some, there is more information on the NHS for baby-led weaning and introducing babies to solid foods and what nutrition they need. So you can find more on the NHS. And then between the ages of 2 and 5, children gradually move towards following the Eatwell Guide. So as their portion sizes increase and they start introducing, you know, more variety to their diet and they start to move towards family foods, by 5 they should be looking at that balance that the well, as parents should be looking at the balance of foods that they need following the amounts in the Eatwell Plate. And then finally, the Eatwell Plate depicts more of a Western diet. So as we go through, you'll see the images focus more on Western foods than other cultures. And so especially in a diverse city like Birmingham, we do need to be more aware that the guidance might be a little less accessible or relatable to some of the cultures within the city where a Western diet isn't followed. And so it can be useful to think about some of those more cultural foods where they might fit to enable some of those conversations to be had. And Lydia will pick up a little bit more on this and learning about what we know about food habits in the city in her presentation. So to kick off the Eatwell Guide, the first section that we're going to look at is the fruits and vegetables section. And the guidance is that we eat at least 5 portions of a variety of fruits and vegetables every day. Okay, so most of us are not eating enough fruits and vegetables as it is. So the latest figures that we have are that the proportion of adults meeting the recommended 5 a day at England, West Midlands and the Birmingham level are all around 50%. So in Birmingham, we're actually below the national average at 47.5%. So under 50% of adults are not meeting that 5 a day. So they're not getting enough fruits and vegetables in their diet. So there really is a job there to encourage people to maybe find out why that is, but also show how easy it can be to like get some of those fruits and vegetables into a day through, you know, snacks or, you know, getting them into different sauces or foods that they're cooking. And it's important because fruits and vegetables are a really good source of vitamins, minerals and fiber. So those vitamins and minerals are really important for so many different functions in the body. All of these tiny little functions that happen that keep us alive, they play a really important part. And they're a really good source of fiber. And there's 2 types of fiber. that we get from our foods, and from fruits and vegetables we get something called soluble fiber, and that means that our body can absorb a little bit of this fiber, and we think it helps towards controlling our cholesterol. So obviously that really helps with our heart health and things, so they really are beneficial. And when we're talking about eating fruits and vegetables, we think about eating a rainbow, so that we choose different colours of fruits and vegetables and have a variety, because those fruits and vegetables, those different colours, give us with different nutrients in different amounts. So if you can select different colours and encourage those messages with people that you work with in the community, then that's a really good way to make sure that people are getting more of what they need. And it's really useful to know as well that fresh, frozen, tinned, dried and juiced fruits and vegetables all count towards your 5 a day and your fruits and vegetable intake. And I think lots of people sometimes worry that they're going to be wasting fresh fruits and vegetables. So it's important to know that frozen and tinned are much easier to store and much less likely to go to waste. So you're not actually missing out on any nutrition. They are just as acceptable as fresh fruits and vegetables. The only limit really, and I will come on to that a little bit on the next slide, is fruit juice and smoothies. So if you were to drink 5 glasses of fruit juice, you haven't got your 5 a day, unfortunately. As easy as that is, you do actually have to eat some fruits and vegetables as well to make sure that you are getting your 5 a day. So what is a portion of fruits and vegetables? So generally 80 grams of fresh, canned and frozen fruits and vegetables is what counts towards a portion. And we often use a handful as a rough guide. And that works really well for children who eat smaller portions than adults. And obviously as children grow, their hands get bigger as well. So it's a good rule of thumb to use a handful if you haven't got any scales or you're not being that prescriptive around you know, the weight of what you're eating. And with dried fruit, it's actually a little bit smaller. It's 30 grams of dried fruit. And the reason for that is because if you were to have 30 grams of raisins and you turn them back into grapes because you had a magic power, you would actually have a handful of grapes. So when you shrink those grapes down, you have a much smaller portion that probably fits in the center of your palm. And also it's important to remember that the sugar content is more concentrated in dried fruits. So a smaller portion is important in terms of sugar intake. And then, like I mentioned before, some options only count once per day. So 150 mils of juice or smoothie. It doesn't matter whether you have more than that, it only counts once. But again, it's thinking about the teeth. As soon as you start drinking juice or you whiz up some fruits to put in a smoothie, those sugars are then free to attack your teeth. So you don't want to drink too many smoothies. You need to actually start eating some fruits and vegetables as well. And our beans and pulses, they're great for fiber. They normally sit in the protein section, which we'll mention a bit later, but they do count towards one of your portions of your 5 a day. But because their nutrient content is a little bit lower than fruits and vegetables, they only count for 1 portion. And then just to give you a little bit more of a visual, so with our large pieces of fruit, an apple, pear, orange, banana, that would count as 1 portion. With berries and grapes, a handful, so like we've mentioned before, is a really good rule of thumb. With smaller fruits like plums and apricots, 2 pieces of fruit would count as a portion. And then we've mentioned our dried fruit already. Moving on to peas and carrots, so mixed vegetables and things like that, 3 heaped tablespoons would count as a portion. That's not to say that you can only have 3 heaped tablespoons of these vegetables, but if you were to have 6 on your main dinner, then you've had 2 of your 5 a day. So that's how that works. And then just the last line, half a pepper, a medium tomato, medium parsnip. So it gives you an idea of the sizes of some of these. And you can find out more about that, the resource at the bottom, which is the British Dietetic Association. And you can also find out lots more about 5 a day on the NHS Eatwell site. So moving on to our carbohydrate section, this is another large section on the Eatwell plate because we need to be basing our meals around these carbohydrate foods. So basing breakfast, lunch and dinner around these foods that give us energy. Okay, they're a great source of other nutrients in our diet as well. So it's really important that we have these. And one of the key questions that usually gets asked is, why are potatoes in this section and not in the fruits and vegetables section? And the reason for that is, again, the nutrients that these foods give our body, they are really good sources of energy, and so they sit and align with things like bread, pasta and rice. They do give us some nutrients, but they just sit better in this section. And so they often get a bad reputation, carbohydrates. They're often viewed as quite fattening, and that's not the case at all. What we need to be careful of is, like with other food groups as well, it's not just carbohydrates, how much of these foods that we're eating, because whether it's carbohydrates or proteins or, you know, our fruits and vegetables, all of the foods give us calories, they all give us energy. And so energy balance is important. So the more, if we're eating more energy than we expend through exercise, then our bodies automatically save that extra energy, because although our brains know that Tesco's is down the road, or we've got Just Eat, you know, to get a takeaway if we wanted a treat, or that we've got food in the cupboards, our instincts still are worried that we might not get a meal the next day. Our bodies still have that instinct to save that energy in case we need it for an emergency. So if we're eating more energy than we burn off regularly, our body basically starts storing it, and then the spaces and where we store that energy get bigger and bigger, and we put weight on. So it is really important to think about that balance, but also important to remember that carbohydrates are not bad. We just need to think about how much we are eating and how much we need. Okay, but gram for gram, they actually contain fewer than half the calories of fat. So that's really important to remember, that they're not the bad guy. And so we can actually make healthier choices when we are talking about carbohydrates. So we can choose higher fiber options. So there is brown pasta, the brown rice, wholemeal bread, all these different versions that have got that are really good for us. They've not lost as many nutrients because they've not been refined like the white pasta and the normal white rice. So there are healthier options that we can choose in this section as well. And what is a portion? So just very quickly, 1 medium slice of bread is a portion of carbohydrates. So if you were having a sandwich, that would be 2 portions of bread. I'll just pick another couple out. So rice, 2 to 3 tablespoons of boiled rice. Again, if you were to have like 4 to 6 tablespoons, it just means you've had 2 portions of your carbohydrates. And then the same with your breakfast cereal as well. So it's just thinking about the sizes of those, and some of those might be smaller than what you think, and that gives you a little bit more of an idea that maybe our carbohydrate portions need to be a bit smaller on our plates, that it is 1/3 of our plate rather than filling a plate full of pasta and then putting some sauce on the top. So the next section that we're going to look at is our dairy and alternatives. So the guidance is to have some of these foods every day. And these foods are milks, cheeses, yogurts and fromage frais. And they're a really good source of protein for our body. But they're also a really important source of calcium. And of course, calcium helps to keep our bones nice and healthy and strong. And for children, that's really important. So as children are growing, their bodies are taking as much calcium into the bones as possible to make them as strong as possible. And once children stop growing, so when they get to sort of that 18, 19, 20, 21 kind of age, when their bodies stop growing, that's the limit for their calcium intake in terms of their bone strength. So it is really, really important to focus on that calcium intake for children. And with our dairy products, we can also make healthier choices here as well. We can aim for lower fat products, and we can aim for lower sugar products as well. And there's lots of options with milk. So for children under 2, if they've switched to cow's milk, then it's best for them to have the blue top, so the full fat, because of the energy requirements that their body needs while they're growing. But for children over 2, you can look at lower fat options, and it doesn't affect the nutrition. The calcium levels will still be perfectly adequate in those products, but you just get less fat in them. Okay, and again, you can find more information about dairy and alternatives by searching NHS dairy and alternatives. And so just to have a quick look at some of the portion sizes for these foods. So for milk, it's a 200 ml glass. A little under half a pint of milk. And for soya alternatives, it's about the same. And where it says calcium fortified, that's because there won't be a lot of natural calcium in the soya. So those products are fortified to make sure that people are getting the calcium that they need. And that's similar to the way that bread is fortified and margarines with different nutrients that help us in those everyday products. With yogurt, it's a standard pot of yogurt, or if you've got a big pot, it's 3 tablespoons. And with cheese, it's just a matchbox size piece. So one of those small matchbox pieces, size pieces of cheese. And if you're like me and you love cheese, sometimes it's better to go for the stronger flavors so it goes a bit further and you don't have to eat as much of it. But I know how difficult it can be sometimes when you like something. So our next section that we're moving on to is the protein section. And so we need to eat some beans and pulses, fish, eggs, meat, and other proteins. So it doesn't matter whether it's meat protein or whether it's plant protein, whatever your preference is. But they're also a really good source of different vitamins and minerals that our bodies need. And you can see various different options in that image there, that we've got some chickpeas, we've got some lentils, we've got some beans, but we've also got some fish, lean mince, and some chicken and eggs there. Okay, pulses are a really great alternative to meat. So even if you are a meat eater, if you can try to go meat free 1 or 2 days a week, then that's a really good way of cutting down your meat consumption and trying some new things. Lentils are great to be put in lots of different sauces because they take on the flavour of the things that you're cooking. And like if you were hiding vegetables in a sauce to get more vegetables down, like, you know, children, you can do a similar thing with lentils, and once they're cooked through, whiz them up and you've got more protein in that sauce as well. So a really good idea to get different things that your body needs. If you are a meat eater, it's really important to choose lean cuts of meat. So the meat where the fat's been cut off or it hasn't been included in the process, so that it is healthier for you. And when we are looking at the meat that we eat, trying to reduce our red and processed meat, so things like bacon and sausages, go for more, you know, the white meat, and some of the leaner options like poultry would be great. And then with fish, we should be aiming for 2 portions of fish every week as well, if we can. And one of those should be oily. And things that are oily are like your salmon, your mackerel, sardines, and you can get some of those in tins as well. So that's a great way because they're easy to store in the cupboard. And you can find some more information about protein foods again on NHS Eatwell. But you can see that the last 2 sections that we've talked about are a little bit smaller. And that's not because they're not important. We just don't need quite as much food from them, from those groups, as the fruits and vegetables and carbohydrates section. And in terms of portion sizes with your cooked meat, so like if you were to do a roast dinner, when you're slicing up the meat, if you look at the size of a deck of cards, how thick a deck of card is on the sides of those pieces of meat, that gives you a rough idea of a portion. And for your fish options, it's the palm of your hand, and it's 2 eggs is a portion if you like to eat eggs. And with your plant proteins, it's pretty much 4 tablespoons of everything really. So whether it's lentils or baked beans, 4 tablespoons will give you a portion. But with nuts and peanut butter, similar to your dried fruits, it's smaller portion because they are quite energy rich. So with nuts, they're a great source of vitamins and minerals, but they are very energy laden. So a smaller portion is much better. And then we come to the smallest section on our Eatwell plate, our Eatwell guide. So that's the purple section, which contains our unsaturated oils and spreads. And we need to eat these in small amounts. So even though we're told that, you know, fat, we need to be careful with our fat and we need to not eat so much fat, we do need a little bit. And that's because there are certain vitamins that are called fat soluble vitamins, where our bodies need those fats to be able to store those vitamins and use them properly. But like with all fats, they are high in energy, so we do need to use them sparingly. And like I mentioned before, gram for gram, they're 9 calories per gram. So you can see the difference between carbohydrates being just under 4 calories per gram and fats being 9 calories per gram. We have 2 different types of fats as well. We have unsaturated fat, which is the one that we would like to, it's better for our bodies. It's better for us to choose unsaturated fats because they are healthier for us. And those are the ones that are liquid at room temperature. And they include vegetable, rapeseed oil, olive oil. So lots of us use those already in our cooking, and that's great. And those are the ones that we need to use. Saturated fats are solid at room temperature. So those are our animal fats. And you see when you cook some meat that you find the solid fat around the outside. And those are the ones that we need to move away from using because they're not as healthy for us. But again, you can find more information about fat on the NHS website. And in terms of our portion sizes, they're very small amounts. As we said, we only need a small amount of them. So it is just a teaspoon of butter or spread if you were doing a sandwich, or a teaspoon of oil would be a portion. Okay, so we don't need a lot at all. And then for the last bit, I'm just going to run through some of those images that were around the Eatwell guide around the side. So lots of us like to eat things like crisps and chocolates and biscuits. They're a nice treat for us, but they're not included in the food groups for a reason, because they're not needed in our diets. Okay, so whilst we appreciate that people do like to eat them, we just need to remember to try and eat them less often and consume them in smaller amounts. And that's because they can be high in saturated fat, they can be high in sugar, and they can be high in salt. And with saturated fat, our bodies can actually make saturated fat. And so we don't really need to eat any. So our bodies have like these pools of little fatty acids, and our bodies can make what we need for the most part in terms of saturated fat. And so too much, if we're eating extra saturated fat, that can have an impact on our cholesterol, which most people will know has an impact on your heart health. So if your cholesterol is high, then that puts you at more risk of struggling with your blood pressure and your heart. Foods and drinks that are high in sugar, obviously they increase our risk of obesity, because that's a real energy source, that sugar. And if our body isn't using it, like we mentioned before, then our bodies will store that extra energy. So it's really easy to eat a lot of calories with some of these treat foods. But also the sugar can affect your teeth as well. So it's important to remember those things. And with salt, that can have an impact on your blood pressure. So if you're eating more salt than you need, that can have an impact on your blood pressure, and in turn your heart again. So your food really does have an important relationship with your health. And with our salt, the recommendation is that you don't eat any more than 6 grams of salt a day. We actually don't need anywhere near that, and we can get pretty much all the salt we need from having a balanced diet. And that's the same with sugar and fat as well. If we have a balanced diet, we use the Eatwell Plate, we can pretty much get what we need from those other food groups that we've discussed. So just to wrap up, really important to drink fluids as well. So things like water, low-fat milk, sugar-free drinks, including tea, coffee, they all count. If you don't like water, you can flavour it with no added sugar squash or slices of fruit. Be wary of soft drinks because of the sugar content, and especially energy drinks with the sugar content and caffeine. So those options aren't as good for us, but great if you can focus on water and milk and other sugar-free drinks. And the nutrition labels that we have on foods can actually help you make those healthier choices with drinks and other foods. And we will come on to that a bit later, okay? But really important, if you can, increase your water intake, that would be great. So I know I've done a whistle stop tour there, and I'm sorry if that was a bit of a rush, but there is the chat. If you've got any questions, then I can come in and answer any questions in the box if need be. But resources wise, there's a whole list of different resources, reputable resources that will tell you all about different nutrients, different vitamins, different minerals, how to help people to get a healthier diet and a more balanced diet. So these sites are really, really good for you to find out more information if that's what you'd like to do. So I'm now just going to use the last few minutes of my slot to just talk through food labeling, because it links very closely to what we've talked about in getting a balanced diet, making sure that we're fueling our bodies with what our bodies need, and making decisions on what the right thing to eat is. So you may have seen some examples on various different food products where you've got a nutrition table, an ingredients list, a traffic light label. And so these are here on prepackaged food to help you make those decisions so it's a more balanced diet. And the information that are included on these different labels are energy, whether that's in kilojoules or kilocalories. So calories is what we usually use, the term that we use to talk about energy. It has fats and saturated fat on there because they're important for us to know. Carbohydrates and sugars, our protein and salt. Okay. And so what this picture depicts is the back of a food product, and you can see there you've got an ingredients list and you've got a nutrition table. So these ingredients list and nutrition tables actually help you to understand what the main ingredients are in a product. So with an ingredients list, you can see on this example, this is chicken and vegetable broth, and so the ingredients are listed in order of weight. So you can see here that water, carrot, onion, chicken and potato are the top 5 ingredients in this product. And actually that's okay, because all of those things are good for us. They give our bodies things that it needs. If you were to look at something, the top ingredient was sugar, then that's a good indication that product is going to be high in sugar. So the ingredients list can be a really helpful way of knowing how much of certain ingredients are in a product. Nutritional information. So if you look at the table at the bottom, the second column along, nutritional information is always listed per 100 grams. So that doesn't matter whether it's a Mars bar, a lasagna, a jar of curry sauce. It doesn't matter what it is. The nutrition or information will always be listed per 100 grams. Most times it's also listed per portion. So it's important to remember that the portion sizes can vary. Sometimes the portion size might be less than 100 grams, and sometimes the portion size might be more than 100 grams. But that can show you then whether something's high or low in fat, salt and sugar, but it will also tell you how much you're eating per portion. And there are guidelines to tell you whether or not a food is high in fat, high in saturated fat, salt or sugar or not. And I've highlighted here where, things are high and low. So for example, with sugars, if 22.5 grams of total sugars per 100 grams, that is a high level of sugar. Now that's a bit mind-boggling sometimes to try and understand, because we don't necessarily know what 100 grams looks like. But that's where traffic light labeling comes in and makes that a lot easier. So we don't have to necessarily remember all these figures on the screen, but it's just to show you that there are actual guidelines of how this is all worked out. But traffic light labeling puts all of that into a really easy to at a glance view, really. So again, looking at your portions, so it's really important to look at the pack for portion size. So whether this traffic light is telling you that these are the figures per pack or per serving or per portion. So that's really important to know. To know your calories, so the first little bubble talks about energy again, so calories. And underneath all those bubbles, you can see percentages. And so that is telling you what percentage of an adult's reference intake that is. So for example, this label tells you that the product gives you 28% of an adult's intake of energy for the day. So an example for the sugars, it's 15% of their sugar intake for the day. So it's a really good way of seeing, how that all adds up for you. Then you've got the different colours along the top as well. So these important things that we've talked about, fat, saturates, sugars, salt. The red, amber, green tell you whether it's medium, whether it's high, whether it's low. So at a glance, it's really easy, but it also gives you the figures along the bottom if you wanted the figures. And so what we're aiming to do with the traffic light labeling is to reduce the number of products that we buy or consume that have red labels on there, and go more towards the greens and the ambers if we can. Okay, so it just gives you a really good at a glance thing of whether a product is healthier or not. Okay. And then lastly, just another page of resources for you that you can Google at any point. So there's lots and lots of reputable information around food and food labelling to find out more. Okay, so thank you for listening. I know that was a lot of information, but if you do have any questions, I'll give my good shot of answering them in the chat for you. Over to Lydia.
Hi everyone, just going to start sharing my slides with you. So is that working?
Yes.
Amazing. Okay, so hi, I'm Lydia, a Public Health Programme Officer at Birmingham City Council, and today I'm just going to go over how the food habits in the city. So kind of leading on a little bit from what Mel's done, talking about Birmingham as a whole and kind of the inequalities in the city. So I'll just go through the objectives for my session. So to understand the influences of food choice and how Birmingham's diversity affects this. Looking at the inequalities as indicators of a healthy diet, understanding the barriers citizens face when trying to eat healthy, using the seldom heard recommendations and considerations to inform local action, and signposting to culturally appropriate resources. So first of all, I'm just going to start off by talking about what informs our food choices. So the food choices we make are based on a variety of different factors. So these include biological factors, physiological factors such as mood, and economic factors such as cost, and physical factors such as access to food, education, and cooking skills. And economic factors and physical factors can often present barriers to people in achieving a healthy diet. And finally, we've got social factors such as family, peers, culture, traditions, attitudes, and beliefs. And these are really important to consider in such a diverse city in relationship to food. So I'm just going to go over a bit about Birmingham's diversity. And Birmingham is such a diverse city in so many ways, and this creates a city of culture and uniqueness. Outside London, Birmingham is one of the most ethnic and culturally diverse cities in the UK. And if you look at the table on the right, you can see some of the range of ethnic groups that is made up in Birmingham. So there's such a variety, and you can see in comparison to England as a whole, Birmingham is so vastly diverse. As well as ethnic diversity in the city, it's also made up of people from lots of different faiths and religions. So that's just given an example on the right there. And that is from the 2011 census. This is really important to consider, both the religions and the diversity as a whole, as it affects our food choices, and food is expressed in culture, diversity, and our beliefs. So this ethnic diversity and the different diversity in religion really plays a role in how citizens interact with healthy eating messages and their food choices as well. So Mel mentioned what a healthy balance looks like, and really if we don't stick to a healthy balanced diet, obesity can be a consequence of this. So this is excess weight, and this is defined by using the measure of BMI, which you can find on the NHS if you give it a quick Google. So looking at how Birmingham compares nationally, and we can see that the statistics are quite shocking, with 3 out of 5 adults classified as overweight or obese in Birmingham. And this is quite concerning, as being obese can increase your risks of developing serious health conditions such as type 2 diabetes and coronary heart disease. So we really want to reduce these obesity levels in Birmingham. So looking at ways of introducing these healthy messages to citizens throughout Birmingham. So I'm just going to look at some of the inequalities in Birmingham and how this can affect our healthy eating and what this means in relation to health outcomes. So there are inequalities across the UK, and there are also inequalities in the city. And this this diagram really depicts the disparities in health outcomes in relation to ethnicity. So as you can see, in England, people of Black or Asian ethnicity are less likely to meet their recommended 5 a day. And this can be to do with some of the barriers these groups face, and we'll come on to that a little bit more in a bit. So also, people in the most deprived areas of the UK were less likely to meet their recommended 5 a day than those in the least deprived areas. So people from more deprived areas are more likely to not meet their 5 a day, which Mel highlighted how important 5 a day was in her presentation. So we know a lot on kind of a national level, but to understand the more local picture, Birmingham City Council ran a citywide survey to understand Birmingham citizens' relationships with food. So the survey was an online survey distributed to citizens in a variety of ways, including ward forums and through community networks. Sorry. The survey asked about citizens' backgrounds, thoughts on food policies and eating behaviour. The study was cut short and we didn't want COVID-19 to bias it, but we still got a really good response rate with 394 people. And this research will lead into the emerging food strategy, which is due to go to public consultation in autumn. So I'm just going to detail some of the findings from this survey. So when asked, have you been taught how to cook? 90% of people who completed the survey said no, and this could be a potential barrier to healthy eating. And also, only 35% of people said they had seen the Eatwell guide. So that's really why we wanted to introduce it to the session today, as it's always good to go over it. As you can see, like 35% of people had never seen it before. And then when asked how you would describe your diet, 47% of people said they would describe it as healthy in this survey, which is really positive, but also 48.5% said they would just describe it as average. 3.8% said unhealthy. So we've still got a lot of room to do with healthy eating in Birmingham. So just looking at some of the results from policies, and you can see some of the findings here, and really this one on the left just shows that cooking classes were a way that people really wanted to engage with healthy eating, and it's quite positive to see that 38% wanted to see cooking classes for children, as it shows they really do want to engage with healthy eating messages. And then we've got 40% on the right have said they want to make fruit and vegetables more affordable and accessible. So this shows that this could be a barrier to people when trying to eat healthy. So now I'm going to talk about the Seldom Heard Voices survey, which was another survey conducted by the Public Health Division, where 24 organisations were commissioned to capture the thoughts of marginalised groups that weren't necessarily captured in the first survey. So focus groups included individuals from lots of different groups across the city, and you can see them on the picture on the right there. And I don't have time to go through them all today, but these will be recorded and distributed later on, so you can really read that a little bit more in depth. So topics covered in this survey were around food beliefs and choices, access to food, food transformation and consumption, food waste, and food and climate change. So broad of topics around food. And when talking about food beliefs and choices, approximately 1/3 of the groups were familiar with the Eatwell guide again, so a lot of people not familiar with it, so it's a really good talking point for citizens. And the groups were able to classify what a healthy diet was quite well, but they felt like they wanted to make improvements in their diets as well. So it's just really important to understand the barriers to healthy eating, because if we understand these barriers, then we can help to alleviate them and really help to make an impact to people's health and well-being through food. So I'll just run through a few of them quickly, and these are some of the quotes we got back from the shorter reports. I don't have time to read these out today, but again, these will be distributed. So some of the barriers include cooking skills and education on food, time and convenience foods, so convenience foods such as pre-packaged foods. People felt they didn't have enough time to cook from fresh, so would default to convenience foods, which can often be higher in fat, sugar and salt, and all those things that don't fit into a healthy diet, like Mel mentioned on the outside of the Eatwell guide. Also, people felt mental health was sometimes a barrier to healthy eating. They also found affordability an issue, communication, so that some people felt that the healthy eating messages were hard to understand or weren't communicated in the right way for them. So we'll go through that in a little bit more detail in a second. Access to culturally appropriate food. So it really shows you that people in the city are facing a lot of barriers to healthy eating, and to have a healthy diet, we need to try and remove some of these. So what can we do really? So from the Seldom Heard Voices report, we drew together some recommendations and considerations from what we were hearing of the different barriers and from the reports as a whole. So alongside tackling food waste and increasing the availability of healthy food, these are some of the recommendations that came out. So we've got one here about education, and participants really felt that they wanted increased education opportunities. So this is where the partners in the room and different organisations in the room can really come in to be a starting point of a conversation around healthy eating. And they really felt that they wanted this done in a practical way, including skills such as budgeting and cooking. And then they've really highlighted the amazing community projects we've got going on in Birmingham, giving some examples of Incredible Surplus and Rainbow Bridge. And they want these community services to continue. So this is basically a real positive to see that there's such an engagement with such projects and the amazing range of projects going on across the city. Citizens also felt they wanted the ability to grow food, and so that is a conversation that can really engage citizens with food as a start, is growing, even if they don't have a garden, maybe just growing pots of cress on a windowsill and things like that is a point of a start. So also I mentioned policy communication earlier, and some of the things that Mel mentioned in her PowerPoint were the limitations of the Eatwell guides. So the Eatwell guide cultures towards a more Western diet, and some of the citizens in this focus group felt that it didn't really reflect their diet. So what you can do when explaining the Eatwell guide is really try and bring in some of the foods they use into the different food groups of the Eatwell guides. And they felt that we needed to be communicated to with Birmingham citizens in mind whenever we're talking about healthy eating. So I'm just going to go through some of the ways that you can really do that in your organisations and partnerships. So looking at tailoring messages to the individual. So you'll know the people that you're working with really well. So you want to tailor your healthy eating advice to the cultures, preferences and access of the citizens that you're working with. So on the right, you can see the South Asian Eatwell guide, and this is kind of just an example of how you can incorporate different foods from different cultures into the Eatwell guide. So also to provide resources that are translated and accessible. So wherever you are providing resources, try and make them in the language that is appropriate to the citizens that you're engaging with. And being empathetic when communicating to citizens and considering some of the barriers that we've gone through today is really important. And I'm sure you all will be doing this a lot anyway. But I think it's just understanding that if they do struggle with kind of access to food because of finance, maybe relaying some of the healthier food options that are a bit cheaper, so tinned goods. And then being conscious, if you know they don't have a freezer, then talking about frozen goods can often make people switch off if they don't have the facility. So just really talking to the citizens you work with to understand what facilities they have, what the barriers are, and communicating the information based on that report. So also delivering practical engaging sessions, so trying to pull together sessions in a more practical way so they can kind of transcend that language barrier. So you're not just giving out leaflets and things, doing it in really a practical engaging way always helps to engage with healthy eating messages. So now just put some resources up that are more tailored to different cultures. So we've got the Public Health Scotland, Vitamin D and U in different languages, and there's just a range of resources here as well. So these will be shared with you later. So thank you for listening today. And if you have any questions, then please just put them in the chat as well, and I'll pass you on to Basuda.
Thank you, Lydia. Thanks. I'll quickly go through my presentation. I'm just mindful of time, but won't be long. Quickly go through it. Yeah. So I'm just going to talk about plant-based diets today. So what is a plant-based diet and why there's so much interest about plant-based diet, and what are the reasons people choose plant-based diets, and are there any benefits from plant-based diets, and are they all are there any downsides to the plant-based diets, and what recommendations can we make to make them more healthier? So what is a plant-based diet? Plant-based diet is based on foods derived from plants, including vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, and fruit. And some people may include animal products. So we have got a classification here of plant-based diets, depending on some people choosing animal-based products, some other products. So I won't go through this in detail. The slides will be sent over to you. So why there's growing interest in plant-based diet? There's interest in plant-based diets for various reasons, such as health and environmental concerns. Now there's more availability of alternatives to meat and dairy foods, and now the restaurants are serving more plant-based foods. There's interest for animal welfare and ethical reasons, and as well the good effects for the planet. So I've got this slide. This is actually American slide, but just to get an example of land use in animal-based diet and plant-based diet. So for a plant-based diet, to feed one person per year, the amount of land needed can feed 14 people on a plant-based diet. So billions of land could be returned to the forests actually if everybody goes plant-based on a plant-based diet. So why do people choose plant-based diet? So there could be various reasons: cultural, faith, medical, ideological, personal preferences, or social reasons. I've got this slide from a survey conducted in 2009, which shows around 3% of people are following vegetarian diet across West Midlands, which is quite small proportion of people actually. So what are the benefits to individuals of plant-based diets? So it's very easy to achieve 5-a-day target with plant-based diet. Because most of your food is based on vegetables, and it's packed with nutrients such as vitamins, minerals, fiber. And there's very good evidence that plant-based diets reduce the risk of many long-term conditions such as obesity, cancer, stroke, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, dementia, and overall all-cause mortality rate is reduced by 25%. So I've got this, Mel has gone through our Eatwell guide in great depth, but I've just got these slides of Eatwell Plate, Eatwell guide here to show what vegetarians need to replace from this plate. So the meat and fish and this part in vegetarian Eatwell guide needs to be replaced with more pulses, beans, for some vegetarians, eggs and nuts, like this. And for the vegan diet, mainly the dairy part needs to be replaced with more calcium rich fortified drinks like oat drink, soya drink, and then yogurts, soya based yogurts to meet the calcium requirement in vegan diet. So are all the plant-based diets healthy, or are there any downsides to plant-based diet? Vitamin B12 and vitamin D are naturally absent from most plant foods. So for a vegetarian or vegan diet person, these supplements need to be taken for these two. And also some other nutrients like iodine, iron, zinc. For iodine, they are not good source of iodine plant-based diets. And for iron and zinc, these nutrients are more easily absorbed from animal than plant foods. And if people make poor choices with a vegetarian diet and with large inclusion of foods high in saturated fat, salt, free sugars, then it can make them unhealthy. I've got this slide here to show that some, as we have seen, some nutrients do need special attention in vegetarian and vegan diet. And this slide is specifically for vegan diets. So vitamin D, vitamin B12, either supplements are needed. For iodine and for selenium, either supplements are needed, or in some cases like vitamin B12 and iodine, fortified foods can be used to make up with these demands. If these recommendations are taken on board, then vegetarian and vegan diets can be very good diets to achieve good health with all that added advantages of a plant-based diet. That's it really. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Thank you, Vasudha, Mel and Lydia, for a really informative session. Thank you everyone for your attendance and your attention as well. I hope you found that useful. The team has been responding to the questions you've raised in the chat, but if there's any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. We will be putting a video of the session today on YouTube, and there is a full program of these webinars over the coming weeks, so please do come and join us again. It's been great to have you. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.